x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'm making this video to show you how to use Khan Academy to help you learn and understand. So we're going to do a Khan Academy problem. This is the video. This is one of the videos that they show on Khan Academy to teach you how to do something. I'm going to show you what you should do when you're watching a video. There's two different methods. One is you know how to do it, so you just go ahead and do it and then play the video afterwards. Another one is you'll pause the video multiple times. When you're stuck and don't know what's going on, then you would pause it and try to understand what he's explaining. So let's look at the video. So it's, I've stopped it at 1 second. It basically says we're solving for s squared minus 2s minus 35 equals 0. If you know how to solve this, then you should, right at this point, pause the video, solve. After you're done solving, start the video and just verify that they've done everything that you thought they would do, that it's exactly what you thought, and you ended up with the correct answer and everything is awesome. The second way is the way we're gonna do. We're gonna watch this video and I'm gonna pause it intermittently, which means I'm gonna go ahead a little bit and then try to understand what's happening. So if I was starting this video, I'm just gonna play it and then we'll see what happens.
35 is equal to 0. Now this is the first time you've seen this type of what's essentially a quadratic equation. You might be tempted to try to solve for s using traditional algebraic means, but the best way to solve this, especially when it's explicitly equal to 0, is to factor the left-hand side and then think about the fact that those binomials that you factor into, that they have to be equal to 0. So let's just do that. So how can we factor this?
So he's now said the word factor, and if you know how to factor, he said factor the left-hand side, then you would pause the video and you would factor. If you're not sure how to factor, you would continue watching. There are other videos on just factoring. This one is factoring and solving.
Several ways. I'll show you kind of the standard way we've been doing it by grouping, and then there's a little bit of a shortcut when you have a 1 as a coefficient. So when you look at something, when you do something by grouping, when you factor by grouping, you think about two numbers whose sum is going to be equal to negative 2. So you think about two numbers whose sum, a plus b, is equal to negative 2, and whose product is going to be equal to negative 35. A times b is equal to negative 35.
This is the same thing we've been doing in class. We need to find a times c, so 1 times negative 35. We want two things that multiply to negative 35, but we want those things to also add to b, which is going to be negative 2. So they're factoring the same way we've been factoring.
And negative 7, I think that'll work. 5 plus negative 7 is equal to negative 2. So to factor by grouping, you split this middle term into a, we can split this into a, let me write it this way, we have s squared, and then this middle term right here, I'll do it in pink. This middle term right there, I can write it as plus 5s minus 7s, and then we have the minus 35, and of course all of that is equal to 0.
At this point, he is writing it this way, but the way that I've taught it is that we would write it in a box. S squared plus 5s minus 7s minus 35. We would factor out the common terms in the top. So on the top row, these both have an s in common, so an s is going to come out here. The common factor here is what goes in 35 that also goes into 7s would be a 7, and this sign always comes out front. So we have s minus 7. And then we have what's happening vertically. So what goes into s squared that also goes into 7s, and they both have an s in common. And what goes into 35 that also goes into 5, and the biggest number there is 5, and this sign comes out front, so plus 5. So at some point he's going to end up with something that says s minus 7 s plus 5 equals 0. So we're going to watch this video, and he should end up there. Notice I paused it, I did the work, now I'm going to watch.
Now we call it factoring by grouping because we group it. So we can group these first two terms and these first two terms, they have a common factor of s, so let's factor that out. You have s times s plus 5. That's the same thing as s squared plus 5s. Now in these second two terms right here, you have a common factor of negative 7. So let's factor that out. So you have negative 7 times s plus 5. And of course, all of that is equal to 0. Now we have two terms here where both of them have s plus 5 as a factor. Both of them have this s plus 5 as a factor, so we can factor that out. So let's do that. So you have s plus 5 times this s times this s right here, right? S plus 5 times s will give you this term, and then you have minus that 7 right there. Minus that 7. I undistributed the s plus 5, and then this is going to be equal to 0. Now that we've factored it, we just have to think a little bit about what happens when you take the product of two numbers. I mean, s plus 5 is a number, s minus 7 is another number. And we're saying that the product of those two numbers is equal to 0. If I told you that I had two numbers, if I told you that I had the numbers a times b and that they equal to 0, what do we know about either a or b or both of them? Well, at least one of them has to be equal to 0, or both of them have to be equal to 0. So the fact that this number times that number is equal to 0 tells us that either s plus 5 is equal to 0, and maybe both of them, or s minus 7 is equal to 0, or, because that is just green, or s minus 7 is equal to 0. And so you have these two equations. Actually, you could say and or. It could be or and either way. And both of them could be equal to 0.
Now, we had gotten to this point ourselves, but if you weren't able to factor on your own, you should see that here's a slightly different way of factoring. And that's fine. There's different ways to factor. There's many different ways to factor. There's lots of videos online to show you how to factor. This is the method he uses. It's called factor by grouping. And essentially, it's the same as when we make our little box method and factor things out. And now he's setting each one equal to 0. So you might pause it here to do this math on your own and subtract 5 from each side and say s equals negative 5, and then add 7 to both sides and say s equals 7. And so I would be doing this on a separate sheet of paper. And then afterwards, I would play the video to verify that I knew what I was doing. But he also said he's going to tell you a shortcut for factoring, which I talked about in class but have not taught to anyone. There are a couple of students in class who figured this out on their own, but he's going to actually show you the shortcut for factoring, so you might want to hang out a little bit longer to see that shortcut as well.
So let's see how we can solve for this. Well, we can just subtract 5 from both sides of this equation right there. And so you get on the left-hand side, you have s is equal to negative 5. That is one solution to the equation. Or you can add 7 to both sides of that equation, and you get s is equal to 7. So if s is equal to negative 5, or s is equal to 7, then we have satisfied this equation. We can even verify. If you make s equal to negative 5, you have positive 25 plus 10, which is 35, minus 35, that does equal 0. If you have 7, 49 minus 14 minus 35 does equal 0. So we've solved for s. Now I mentioned there's an easier way to do it. And when you have something like this, where you have 1 as a leading coefficient, you don't have to do this two-step factoring. Let me just show you an example. If I just have x plus a times x plus b, what does that equal to? X times x is x squared, x times b is bx, a times x is plus ax, a times b is ab, plus ab. So you get x squared plus, these two can be added, plus a plus bx plus ab. And that's the pattern that we have right here. We have 1 as a leading coefficient here, we have 1 as a leading coefficient here. So once we have our two numbers that add up to negative 2, so once we have our two numbers that add up to negative 2, that's our a plus b, and we have our product that gets to negative 35, then we can straight just factor it into the product of those two things. So it will be product of the binomials where those will be the a's and the b's. So it'll be, so we figured out it's 5 and negative 7. 5 plus negative 7 is negative 2. 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. So we could have just straight factored at this point 2, well actually this was the case of s. So we could have factored straight to the case of s plus 5 times s minus 7. We could have done that straight away. We've gotten to that right there, and of course, that whole thing was equal to 0. So that would be a little bit of a shortcut, but factoring by grouping will,
So the method we talked about earlier, where you find 4 terms and put it in a box, factor it out, works every time. He did show you a little shortcut method. I don't know if you fully understand what he was saying, but essentially, once I have the factors of negative 35 that add to negative 2, positive 5 and negative 7, I just set up a set of parentheses. S is the first thing, and then this is positive 5, so plus 5, and that's negative 7, so minus 7, and set them each equal to 0. So there is a shortcut. If you understand the shortcut, feel free to use it. This only works if the leading coefficient is 1. If the leading coefficient is not 1, then you have to use the box method factor. Or if you know factor by grouping, there's other methods that other teachers have taught as well. So this is how you're supposed to watch a video. And we're verifying our information as we're going on. This is how you watch a Khan Academy video, by writing down on a piece of paper, following the steps, and figuring out how to do it on your own. Every time you don't understand something, rewind it and go back. Rewind it and go back. Rewind it and go back. If you keep rewinding and going back, then you'll understand what's happening at some point. But if you just watch it like a movie where like, oh, that doesn't seem important, and you skip it, then you're not going to know that piece. All right, so make sure that you're watching the video, not like a movie, but watching it like you're taking notes and you're physically present. You should be writing this stuff down on a piece of paper to learn.